Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Wednesday. It's May the 7th. Appreciate you being here. We got an interesting show, I think, for you today. We're going to be talking about terrorism. We're going to be talking about a thing that is not being talked about by a lot of folks. I don't see it. I went looking for it in the news stories. I used the Google search function. I used the DuckDuckGo search function. I typed in 1,200 known/suspected terrorists, United States. I got a couple of fringe news sites. I found it covered by Law Enforcement Today only. Why is that? Why are the main media sources not talking about the thing that Tulsi Gabbard went out and explained, that we have known or suspected terrorists, over 1,000, that have been identified in the United States. Now, 600 of them are going to be people that are associated with the newly declared terrorist organizations, aka transnational organized crime, gangs, etc. That's your TDAs, that's your MS-13s, and so on. But we know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that thousands and thousands of unvetted potential terrorists from countries that harbor terrorists came into this country under the Biden administration. And I want to bring that up because I think, as usual, we have a right-wing echo chamber. It's being championed right now by various voices on the right, including people like Jim Jordan, who might be the greatest offender at this point. They're pushing forward this narrative that now that we're in charge, everything is great. New management equals all the problems of the past are done. That's not the case. It's not true. We didn't fix a problem by putting 2 new people in the FBI, by putting a Tulsi Gabbard at ODNI. Tulsi Gabbard is fighting an uphill battle against an entire establishment. 60, 70, maybe 80% of the intel community leans hard left. And it's the same problem that I've been calling out from the FBI side because I saw intel people, and it turns out across the board, CIA, FBI, NSA, take your pick, people over at DHS, HSI, all these people, a lot of the admin types, all the indoor dogs tend to lean further to the left. They vote for Democrats because they vote for more government. They think government is the solution. And problematically, when we start talking about the term terrorism, is that it is ill-defined in the domestic sense. I want to key you in on some of this stuff. So we've got some sort of like news of the day grab bag, and we're going to get to a second half talking about terrorism, because the same people that are going out and telling you about domestic terrorism right now are the exact same foot soldiers from the FBI and from the various different JTTF agencies, the Joint Terrorism Task Force agencies, that went after the domestic threat under Biden. It turns out when you use the words domestic terrorism, think Steve Jensen, think the guy that just got promoted in charge of the Washington field office in the Bureau. When you start using the words domestic terrorism, you are talking about the foot soldiers of the current thing for whatever regime is out there. Those people do not operate under a particular set of principles. They operate on what leads come their way. And the leads are determined by intelligence, and the intelligence is determined by people on the left right now. So it is not solved. I will go back to a thing that was said, and it is not a dunk to say that somebody told us that personnel is policy. If personnel is policy, and I believe that, by the way, that is bandied around by people in the government all the time. The people you choose to run things tells you what you think about the thing you are running. We're in a very specific space right now where personnel is policy and the personnel have not been changed. So they are simply taking new marching orders. And if you think that you cannot switch that chip, kind of like do the meme style, where you pull one chip out that says one thing and put in another chip, the same people that were telling you white supremacy was the biggest threat to the homeland are now marching out different tunes. But nobody is talking about the actual real threat, which continues to be the case. And I'm going to show you evidence from the agency that is saying otherwise. Our FBI tells us that the biggest threat is domestic terrorism operations. They want to go out and message with PR. I'm going to show you who the quote-unquote most wanted terrorists are in the United States, according to that same FBI. And I'm going to give you a hint. Every one of them has a foreign name because terrorism in the United States continues to be foreign. Domestic terrorism is a very flexible, malleable concept, and I'm going to show you the mealy-mouthed language they use in a little bit here so we can kind of stay with it. I don't want you guys to think that simply because someone says it is so that it is. We should never take these people at their word. Not once. All right, that's where we're going. There are many threats out there in the world, including things to your own personal safety and to your own financial security. We're going to talk a little bit about patriot-protect.com. Patriot-protect.com/Kyle is the website. News reports have revealed that DeepSeek, which is China's AI data scraping company, has suffered major data breaches. This is not a big deal for China. They don't mind leaking all of the Americans' information. They've dumped over 1 million highly sensitive American data records onto the dark web, including names and email addresses, relatives, addresses that you've lived at, work histories, personal details, and so on. This hands cyber criminals everything they need to target you. They can pretend to be you, or they can pretend to be a company that you do business with and get more information from you, including your financial data. If you didn't think you were affected, you should think again. DeepSeek is constantly gathering information without your permission. They're leaking it out without your knowledge. It's not about password leaks. This is the kind of information that people use to impersonate you, hijack your accounts, destroy your finances, go to your family members and extort them. There are a million different schemes. They are all being run at once. The question is, are you in the bundle of leads? If you listen to our Sunday special, the Glengarry leads, are you one of those leads that somebody's going to buy and spend 10 cents to try to vet to see if they can get you? If you want your name out of the pile, you use something like Patriot Protect's blackout service. It searches the dark web, finds your information, and removes it from the people search sites that scammers are using to hunt for victims. The search and destroy protocol wipes out your personal information from over 100 data brokers, and it's constantly monitoring for new threats. That's why it's a subscription. It costs you about as much as leaving your porch light on at night. Don't be the next victim. Check out patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Again, Patriot Protect. The link is in the show description. Check them out. They're the ones we use here, both my wife and I. Let's go ahead and get into today's show. Like I said, we're going to start with some kind of like grab bag information, and we're going to get into domestic terrorism. All right, folks. Listen. There are things happening all over the world, some of which are less interesting to me only because it is across the world and it's not going to directly affect me. But we should at least be aware. I find out constantly from people, I'll just name them. My mother will tell me, like, oh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know it was happening until you said something about it. Well, that's because I read the news every single day and I go digging through this nonstop. I do it from day break until the sun sets and after the sun sets to try to find out what's going on, some of which is interesting to me, some of it is not. I'm not a foreign policy expert. I never have been. But you're hearing this story here from CBS. We'll just read some of it. It's worth noting that there are conflicts happening in the world right now between India and Pakistan. Now, this is a centuries-old conflict, and that border is constantly having all kinds of show of forces between the two military groups there. However, air raid sirens blaring in India after Pakistan vows to avenge an act of war because India sent missile strikes into Pakistan. So lest you know, that is going on. Of course, it was the subject of Twitter memes or X memes, people on social media talking about it. My favorite one was that people basically said, I am now switching out my virologist hat for my tariff expert hat, and now I'm a war expert on Pakistan and India. I won't pretend to be that thing here. I'm going to read a little bit of the story just so you have kind of an instinct on what is happening. They're both apparently nuclear powers, so that is a problem. Whether any of them is going to escalate to that level is another story. Air raid sirens blared in many locations across India on Wednesday afternoon, yesterday, after Pakistan vowed to retaliate for Indian missile strikes that hit several places in Pakistani territory earlier that day. They fired missiles into Pakistan and Pakistani-administered Kashmir early Wednesday. There were fierce clashes along the line of control in Kashmir, killing a total of at least 31 people, including a child. Other estimates from ABC said 26, with 40-plus injured. Pakistan's leader called the missile salvo an act of war. India said it struck infrastructure used by militants in a months-long massacre of tourists. You guys may have seen that. We didn't cover it here, but it has been going on. There was a slaughtering of tourists. In fact, there was a really, really unsettling video of a guy who looked like he was an American tourist running on a zip line, filming himself with like a selfie stick. Meanwhile, people are getting smoked and mowed down by AKs underneath him, and he was completely oblivious to it, kind of going, yay, flying around on this deal where, again, there's like a terrorist attack happening at his feet. He's about 75 feet above them from what I could tell. Anyway, so this has been going on for a little bit of time. Pakistan said it shot down several Indian fighters in retaliation. 3 planes fell into villages in the India-administered Kashmir district, according to local media and witnesses. So this is something going on. There's some pictures out there of what that looked like. Your presidential figures or your heads of state. Tensions have been soaring since this happened. What do they say? That gunman happened a week ago or so, 2 weeks ago. In any case, that's the backdrop. The world is not all peaches and gravy. It is pretty nice here, which is something my wife brought up to me yesterday. She said, I'm walking out there. There's all this chaos in the world. We're seeing like a rise of racism, which I do think plays into this domestic terrorism piece. There's a rise of racism in the United States where people are now talking about race even more than they did under Barack Obama, even more than they did under Joe Biden. I got the feeling that those guys were blowing oxygen into the fire that exists, because when people see that there's chaos and they see that there's difficulties in front of them, many times people turn to the simplest solution. Our buddy George Hill is big on talking about this. When people see complicated problems and they bring you the simplest solution, like it's the Jews or it's the blacks or it's the fill in the blanks, it's the Muslims, that's always going to be a bad answer. But there's always a nugget of truth to what they are saying. They've obviously seen something that people can associate with, and we rush to do stereotypes. Stereotypes are actually really important. And it reminded me of confirmation bias, because that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit later today. Let me throw one more thing on here. 26 dead. Like I said, the reports of what was going on between Pakistan and India and the numbers varying, but like a fair number of people. The story of confirmation bias is something we should always be really cautious of. It's something that I'm acutely aware of, and I almost always try to check myself. I may not do it in real time, but at any given week, I go back and I reflect about my own confirmation bias. I want you to do the same. We get very quick to look at somebody and say, this person is my expert in this field, and therefore they are correct about it. And we should be cautious about that. We should actually do the opposite of that. We should skeptically evaluate it. I want you to think about a physician. If you are an expert on one thing, if you are someone who is invested in understanding one thing, it is far more likely that you attribute all the problems in the world to that one thing. Unless you actually have such a broad range of experiences that you can lean on other things to check yourself, you will oftentimes find yourself lumped in to this very narrow tunnel vision where the thing that you expect it to be is the thing that it is. If you go out in the world and look for racism, you will find dozens and dozens of examples in current news stories in your own community. You will find them. If you go out and look for a specific disease that is causing all of your problems, you will find that thing popping up more and more. And you go, oh my God, how much is it? The question you should always ask is it actually so prevalent, or are you in fact looking for that thing and therefore predetermined and predisposed to finding it? And the real danger is because we live in an AI moderated, an algorithm generated world where a lot of the things that you find, they're not coincidental. It's because you are most likely to be interested in them. We've done little discussions about it on this podcast before, but the idea of weaponized attention span is a real serious problem that didn't exist maybe 50 years ago. It didn't used to work like that they could curate a news feed so you got the exact New York Times that you wanted. But now you go through in your news feed, whether it be RSS, whether it be Google, whether it be anything else, whether it be X, whether it be Facebook, they are looking to keep your attention span. So the things that you are most likely to be interested in based on what you were interested in before is going to pop up. And that's worth knowing. They have used this, they being the media, the information sphere that is trying to keep your attention. There's an entire apparatus out there that is dead set on keeping your eyeballs glued to things. And if you're outraged or you're in fear, it is more profitable because you're more likely to stay there. That happens on the left and the right, by the way. Especially when you're critical of the right and you listen to it, you can see it. I also want to give you another analogy. If you went to, let's say, an orthopedic surgeon and you told them that you had back pain, they would do analysis, they would look at your spine, they would look at the bones, and they would probably recommend that there's an orthopedic surgery that they could do where they could grind down pieces of bone, or they could add in some kind of a mesh implant, or they should fuse your spine, or whatever they're going to do, but it's an orthopedic surgical answer. Now, if you went to the same thing and talked to a neurologist, they would tell you it's a neurological problem. And they would give you all the reasons why you might want to do this kind of treatment, why you might want to do some non-invasive stuff, why you might want to take some medications, or there's going to be some injections, some nerve blocks, and so on. If you choose your expert, you oftentimes also choose your solution. So we have to be very cautious about that when we look at these things. And that is going to play deeply into the domestic terrorism that I want to talk about in the second half. On top of that, we have an instinct to go for the most salacious and the most interesting. And what we don't want to do is talk about boring things like financial status, unless it's a crash. We don't want to talk about numbers. We don't want to talk about money. We don't want to talk about manipulations of interest rates and what that's going to end up being. This is coming from Rachel Maddow. This is salacious. This is exciting. This is nonsensical. This is an article that came out of their blog. So this is why I rarely go over to MSNBC, because I find more propaganda than not. It's kind of like going over to Fox. It's the analogy of it. Fox has like a mixed bag of like useful stories and then stuff like this that are just propaganda pieces. Newark Airport meltdown adds an alarming trend of air traffic control chaos under Donald Trump. Trump, who's been in office for 100 days. This is a deep-seated problem when you have antiquated federal systems that push back. And remember, every single federal system wanted to, quote-unquote, resist Donald Trump. And you're going to immediately assign it. The story on this, by the way, this comes from a May 5th excerpt. So this was 2 days ago on the Rachel Maddow show. They basically adapted it to be a piece because they need more content. And it was published yesterday in the afternoon. 9 days after President Trump was sworn in for his second term as president, a terrible mid-air collision killed 67 people just outside of Reagan National Airport over the Potomac River. 2 days later, on the 31st, a medical transport plane crashed in Philadelphia. 7 people were killed and another dozen were injured. 2 days after that, a United Airlines plane caught on fire on the tarmac, where flames were seen shooting out of the wing. There were 104 passengers involved and 5 crew members who were evacuated. 3 days after that, on February 5th, a Japanese airliner smashed into the tail of a Delta airliner at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. On February 7th, officials recovered the wreckage of a small commercial plane that crashed in Alaska. All I'm seeing here are local news stories that are completely unrelated to each other, and they have absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. And yet, this attempt to tie it in because they've seen that Donald Trump is the boogeyman. They have the predisposition, the stereotypical belief that all things that happen bad in this world must be Donald Trump's fault. And so then they just go draw a line out there. There's no lines between any of these things. Some of these are air traffic control failures. That's not Donald Trump's fault. I'm not even sure it's Pete Buttigieg's fault. It's the fault of a bunch of bad hiring that happens at a much lower level than the cabinet official. And then you have like stories about bad maintenance where things are on fire. How about a Japanese airliner bumping into the tail of a, like that's a pilot who's distracted or a pilot who doesn't have a familiarity with the aircraft or the airport that he's in. That's a traffic issue is what we would call it in the ATC world, right? Somebody probably got a call, hold for traffic and didn't and rolled out and bumped into somebody else. No injuries. You know, a small prop planes and small commercial crafts crash on a fairly regular basis. They're still fairly safe, but it does happen. It's not unusual. There's dozens of examples of it. What do these things have to do with each other? 2 people were killed when planes collided midair at a regional airport northwest of Tucson. They don't give any information about why these things happen, by the way. None. It's just like, it's Donald Trump and it's bad. So they've already decided what the answer is before they've even asked the question. In fact, I don't even see a question in here. They just assume it to be the case. This has also got a subheadline. They're trying to link you to something about Elon Musk demanding that the FAA administrator resign. The reason why is because he had no understanding of airspace or piloting. He was like a guy who could run an airport and previously had, which doesn't make you a great administrator for the FAA, it turns out. So go figure. We've got people that are not being real serious about it, but they are able to take your attention span and move it out there. They're able to get you moving. How about this one? I saw this the other day. This is from Ed Markey. If you want to see some of the most cringeworthy, weird stuff, watch members of Congress, especially the ones over 70 or members of the Senate. This is a senator doing the scene from Love Actually, which is a fantastic movie. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies. It's full of hope. And right in the wake of 9/11, it reminds us that family matters and that travel is about seeing people during the holidays. And it tells you a couple of love stories that are good and real and you know, whatever. It's like, you know, it's cheesy because it's Hollywood. And then there's this guy. And I'm going to read to you what is on the screen for those of you who are listening. It's Ed Markey, a man standing in a suit with a small little like boom box, a blue one, and he's holding up signs that propped up by big tech. We withdrew from the WHO. He's just holding up signs that are like pre-printed. We pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement. It's like, yeah, we know. We already voted for Donald Trump. That's what we wanted. He created Doge. He's tossing them aside like the guy who was giving it. Called for an end of birthright citizenship. Nearly canceled $400 million in helping communities. Eliminated the Office of Climate Change and Health and Equality. Yeah, good. Attacked the clean car regulations. Unleashed ICE at schools and hospitals. We're going to talk about more of that later. Disbanded the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Thank God. Repealed AI protections for minority communities. I don't even know what that means. Help states refuse abortion care, threaten women's health, threatened to take over the Panama Canal, fired 18 inspector generals who didn't do anything. He's having a hard time holding on to things because he's old. Like, threatened military action against Greenland, maybe. I don't know. Cut all-siders, fired people, got rid of the American Climate Corps. Hundreds of FAA employees, right? Got rid of 200 probationary employees. So all this stuff keeps going on. This is all crazy. These are all the things that you all wanted for. Spread vaccine misinformation, blamed a plane crash on DEI that probably was blamed on DCI. They actually, since this video came out, they actually came out and said that the fact is there's a culture in the military right now where pilots will not ask additional questions when there's a female pilot involved, even someone who worked for the Biden administration and has been out of the cockpit for a long time. You know, they're going to keep digging on these crashes. Some of them will have to do with pilot error. Some of them will have to do with mechanics. Some of them will have to do with, just an unskilled crew or just a couple of like compounding problems. What a weird situation to have like this dude out there. This is a U.S. senator dropping all these pictures. And this is truly cringy stuff. Again, he's playing Silent Night in the background, which is a story about the birth of Jesus, is it not? They just don't get it. So we've got that guy. Like you said, some of this stuff is truly just self-affirming. Donald Trump is responsible for Newark airport meltdowns, I'm sure. Some of them actually are really boring and continue onward, and we have to know about them even though it's not that interesting to us, because you're going to get people that are going to claim that whatever Jerome Powell does, here he is on the screen, whatever he does with the interest rates, it's somehow Donald Trump's fault, whatever the market reacts to it. Even though theoretically they think the Fed is like this like non-governmental third-party agency that sits outside and tries to control the economy based on mandates and not based on direct advice. I guess we'll see. Read you this story here. This is from ABC. Kind of boring, but important. The Fed is expected to hold interest rates steady, defying Donald Trump. Trump wanted them to cut interest rates to be able to put more money back into the market. That's his idea, to be able to look. At the end of the day, Trump has got to decide what he wants to do. And I'm happy to call things either way. I think it's going to you have to have austerity. Those of you who remember Ronald Reagan, which is, by very early childhood, but a lot of you remember my folks' first house was like a 14% interest rate on their mortgage. That's what it took. It took pulling us out of the crap of Jimmy Carter, which I think Joe Biden probably supplanted Jimmy Carter as the crappiest president. So if that's the case, it takes real serious aggressive policies that nobody likes. 14% interest rate, pulling out of all those climate accords that Markey was crying about, doing all those things, heavy cuts to government spending, heavy cuts to government employment. We're not even seeing all the stuff that we should be seeing. And we had Andy Schectman on this program not too long ago talking about, listen, if we're going to actually get to the other end of this, we have to look at it like Andy Dufresne in that movie, The Shawshank Redemption. We've got to be able to step through the hole and drop into a sewer pipeline and crawl through a river of crap. Foul-smelling garbage. We have to get to the other end of it. And you got to see it through. If you get halfway into the tunnel full of crap, Andy Dufresne ends up drowning in the next flood of sewage that comes out. So you got to go out to the other side. Once you begin this journey, you got to come out the other end of it. So if the Fed doesn't lower interest rates, that means that I can't buy a house sooner than when I want to. So be it. If it's better for the country, if it's better for my kids in the long run, how many of us are willing to deal with that? I think most of us who have children look out there and say, what's it going to take for this country to be righted? How do we keep these people away from our children? We're going to talk a little bit about domestic terrorism in a second. I just want to remind you, we played this clip yesterday. To me, having worked domestic terrorism cases, this is as real as it gets. If you're listening, what you can't see is a bunch of cops moving back at the orders of people who are using the threat of violence and physical coercion as they bang on shields, all dressed in sort of a militaristic uniform. They're wearing goggles. They're wearing face masks to be able to protect themselves from pepper spray and CS. These people came prepared to engage in violence in order to get a political outcome. In this case, their video that the outcome they want is the United States to divest from, Israel and to save Gaza from Washington State University somehow because of Boeing. Just the illogical jumps of it are not there. Again, a simple solution to an incredibly complex problem that's been around for centuries. So there's that. But on top of it, there's ongoing issues that we just don't even want to focus on. Everybody wants to go to the salacious stuff. Oh, we're exporting illegal aliens. Oh, we got an MS-13 guy. He's got MS-13 on his knuckles in pictograms. Oh, they're deporting children. Meanwhile, our federal government has been by policy, screwing Americans. And putting new people in charge doesn't solve that problem unless they go out there, admit there's a huge problem, say it's going to take a while to fix it, and do the things that will fix it. Here's Scott Bessent, he's the Treasury Secretary, talking about payments. You want to talk about the most unsexy thing in the world? How about accounting? Does anyone get really excited? Other than the movie The Accountant with Ben Affleck, who's basically an accountant that does books for mobsters and then kills people. Like, that's exciting. That's kind of fun and sexy. He's also autistic, so he's like the new superhero, right? But generally speaking, accounting is really dull and boring, and it's tune-out time. This is not going to be played lots of places. This is not going to be a clip that you see because it doesn't bring anybody a lot of excitement. There's no salacious details until you listen to how much money the federal government has been moving around without the authorization by the federal government to do so. And then you start realizing that the scariest things come in this very banal. The banality of evil is a real concept. Boring, uninteresting, numerical, spreadsheet-based theft of your future and your children's like financial security in the future.
Can you define for the committee today what an improper payment is and some examples of what you're seeing and why these procedures were not already in place before, Mr. Secretary?
Well, it's a bit mystifying why they weren't in place. And what we are seeing is that there was a very complacent upper level of management in many departments across the entire government. What I can say at Treasury, that of the 1.5 billion payments we send out every year, they're required to have something called a TAS, a Treasury account symbol. We discovered that more than one third of those payments did not have a TAS number. So as the Appropriations Committee, you should be shocked by that, because how can a payment be tracked back to an appropriation? Only through the TAS number. So there was no accountability. So that is why the 450 organizations that sit above Treasury, where Treasury acts as the paymaster, are unable to pass an audit. So we have the crackdown on that. Every payment now requires a TAS number.
Do you know how boring that is? And how insane what he just said? He just said that this should shock you, that you should be appalled, and didn't, he didn't restate it in any meaningful way. He didn't do it in a salacious manner so that it was going to catch all the clicks. He said that the United States Treasury, I had to write this down, the United States Treasury Department processes 1.5 billion payments a year on behalf of the federal government. And all of those payments are required to have what's called a TAS number. The TAS number is an authorization key code that ties back to the appropriation that Congress did to authorize said payment. Imagine if you got a credit card statement and you had payments out, $57.37 on this date, and you don't know where it came from. You don't know who you paid. In this case, they know who they paid, but they don't know who authorized the payment. It's more like having government credit cards out there when you couldn't see who was the holder of the credit card. The credit card authorizer is not there. The TAS number is required so that Congress can go back and do an audit, or actually the auditors go back and do the audit. And we talk about all these people failing audits. What it means is over a third of the 1.5 billion. That means like 500 million plus payment. 500 million plus payments is beyond our ability to grasp as a human being. Those are apparently not being looked at and not trackable, so none of these people can pass an audit because 33% of the payments are just out there in the wind. They're being paid and nobody knows what the hell's going on. And that's business as usual. How long has that been going on is the question. I need more information about this. And again, it is not sexy and it is not going to make big headlines, except a third of our payments out of our federal government, out of our treasury, are untraceable. And they're not tied to the thing that should authorize them. You wonder why the government does whatever the hell it wants? It's because it has money that's not accountable to anybody else. That's wild. That is a truly wild thing to say. And again, not exciting. Not going to make the big bombshell headline of child arrested and deported with mom despite being U.S. citizen, or Kristi Noem has $3,000 cash and is stuck up and is robbed by an illegal alien. Take your pick of what side you want to go on. This is the unsexy part and the real part of looking into what are the real problems in this country. And almost all of them come back to the most boring thing: greed, money, bureaucratic incompetence. It's nonstop. I'm pretty riled up right now, so let's go ahead and talk about Blackout Coffee. I've got my second cup, or maybe my third cup going right now in my Patriot cooler. It is blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Coffee company we've been telling you about for a couple of months. If you guys haven't tried it, the flavor is fantastic. It is an upgrade. There's only two companies that I've been buying coffee from. One is a little like organic company out of Austin, and they're at Costco, so they're easy enough for me to find. The other one is this Blackout Coffee. I got 5 pounds of it from one of you all. I won't mention his name, but you know who you are. And you guys sent me this stuff, and it's like, okay, and then not long afterwards, we had them approach us. You're seeing on the screen right now their recommendation on how to make it, what the dose of those beans are, and how you grind them. It's the same way we do it. I have almost the exact same French press. I have a different little kettle, but yeah, we put it in a steel French press so I can do it while I'm still kind of groggy. We throw in some boiling water and we make a damn good cup of coffee. These guys are roasting all their own beans in a 64,000 square foot warehouse. They grew it out of a garage. Like many people who started their own business, it started something very small and humble, and they built it up to over 30 hardworking American employees. They don't have any corporate nonsense. They make a damn good cup of coffee. They make real simple stuff. In fact, if you look over my shoulder during the show, you'll see it's just black and white, you know? That's kind of how it works in the morning. I don't need a lot of nuances. I'm trying to get my brain going. I want Blackout Coffee. It's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. My folks came in and tried it. My dad was particularly, he was like, yeah. He's like, I can taste the difference. This is the one I like. Let's order that one. That's how it works. Give it a try. Get a couple different varieties if you guys like. You can get them at blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. You'll save 20% on your first order. It helps keep the American dream alive for people that are doing real work in America. It supports real coffee. You can drink Blackout Coffee at blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Don't drink weak coffee. Get a kick in the beans. Start your day off the right way. That's all good stuff. You should be doing those things anyhow. Okay, should we get into terrorism? Because that's kind of like where I'm real passionate right now, too. Let's start with this story. This is truly dull, boring, dangerous. Again, in the monotony, we find the true trouble. This is a speech. This is an opening statement, and I've got a little section of it. The statement and the hearing was called Confronting White Supremacy. This is in the Trump 1.0 time. Yet more evidence that Donald Trump never ran any of these things. This is Mr. Michael Garrity. He was the former Assistant Director of Counterterrorism Division at the FBI, speaking in front of Congress at the Oversight and Reform Committee. This is the one that was the subcommittee on civil rights and civil liberties. You would think that they would know white supremacy is a constitutionally protected status. You are allowed to be an a-hole in America. Here's where I want you to be most tuned in. I want you to be very cautious about things like this. It's verbiage. It's real specific. He says, good afternoon. He's talking to Ranking Member Raskin, Member Roy, that was Chip Roy, subcommittee, blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk about the FBI's counterterrorism mission. They want to disrupt terrorist actors, prevent terrorist attacks. That's a very difficult thing to do, to move what they call left of bang and be proactive. You have to have very good intel, and intel almost always involves constitutional violations of civil rights and civil liberties. About 5-6 paragraphs in, he says the following, and this is where I want to key you into it. Domestic terrorism is defined by statute as any dangerous act to human life that violates U.S. criminal law and appears intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of the government by mass destruction, assassination, violence, or economic harm to the United States. Okay? Like that. Remember, though, this is the same FBI that was arguing Antifa is only an idea, and that idea got me shipped across the country in 2020 to go and watch members of that idea as they were holding a city hostage in Portland. So, again, it only works when we actually believe in the things we say, and if you're in the FBI, you don't have to believe things. You just go out there and say whatever you want in front of Congress. The act in question must occur primarily within the jurisdiction of the United States. Here's where I see the biggest single issue. I'm honing in at the middle of this paragraph. It's right in the middle of a bunch of other sort of like statutory definitions. We assess domestic terrorists pose a persistent and evolving threat of violence. Persistent and evolving threat. I gotta track it. Of violence and economic harm to the United States. Okay, so he's using the statutory language, violence and economic threat. But here it is, persistent and evolving threat. Those are the words. That's what I was honing in on. What does that mean, persistent and evolving? It means it's always there, but it's always changing. So what is it? That's an honest question. I'll ask the chat. What is it? What does it mean for it to be a persistent and evolving threat? It means nothing. That's government speech for we're on it. Trust us. We've got this. That's problematic for a law enforcement agency. Persistent and evolving. You guys get it? They're just making it up as they go. And that's why white supremacy is the threat today. And now it's child sexual exploitation using pedophiles. That's today. How about whatever it is they need it to be? That's what it is. I'm going to show you what the threat actually looks like because it's been really clear for a long time. It's not evolving white supremacy. It's not January 6ers. It's not parents at school board meetings. It's not Catholics who want Latin mass. It's none of those things. But if you're the FBI, it's all of those things. Why is it? Because the people that go after these evolving, persistent threats are willing to also evolve based on funding. This is what the threat really looks like. On the screen right now, you're seeing a picture that I captured in 2020. I'll be less specific, because this was a case, and for all I know, it's still ongoing. That was a picture that a buddy of mine took. I've got a telephoto lens. Off in the distance is a terrorist subject who is sworn to a terrorist ideology, foreign-based. It is a Muslim-based or Islamic terrorist threat. And I am climbed up on the top of a probably 1,200-foot little ridge line. And we climbed up there to take pictures of this guy shooting with a rifle in the desert and practicing. That's what the terrorist threat looks like. The threat looks like somebody who has a weapon system that's ready to go out and do something dangerous to a civilian population, and they are motivated by an ideology that has proven that they'll do it before. That's the terrorist threat right there on the screen. Okay? That's what I look like when I was doing my job. There's another picture I've got of my buddy who took the picture, the two of us taking kind of like a selfie out in the desert when we climbed down from that ridge line, because we drove in from the back end. There was a plane overhead. This guy was actively involved in military-style training, what I would call move-to-contact type drills. About the same time that came out, also, we saw this. This is from 2021. This is like less than a year later from the New York Times. Top law enforcement officials say the biggest domestic terror threat comes from white supremacists. They're flexible. It's persistent and it's evolving. It's at all times coming after you because it's whatever we need it to be. Attorney General Merrick Garland and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, those two criminals, you guys remember them? Those guys did criminal things in this country, none of which are prosecutable, none of whom are going to find themselves on the wrong end of an FBI investigation at this point. Why is it? Because they've already declared victory. You want to know what the victory looks like? I'll show you, actually. The victory looks like this. This is Jim Jordan giving a speech talking about domestic terrorism in the case of a shooter, a lone shooter, who was killed at the baseball field at the congressional baseball game in 2017. The guy died on the scene. The investigation, whether they did a good job or not, is irrelevant. Whether it was domestic terrorism, it's a dead guy. There's no further investigation for dead guys. You can't charge them, except if it's Ashley Babbitt. You can actually do investigations into her. If you guys have seen this, the DOJ is looking at doing a settlement with her family for like maybe $30 million. Judicial Watch was pushing that. Good for them. The fact is they opened a criminal investigation into a dead woman. You don't generally do that. You can investigate and help the cops try to figure out what happened just to make sure that there's nobody else involved. Here's Jim Jordan basically saying, now we got the good guys in, so all the problems are solved.
Suicide by cop, the guy had a hit list in his pocket. He had 6 names, Republican members of Congress, on a piece of paper in his pocket. Comey, McCabe, Wray, they all knew that it was domestic terrorism, but that didn't fit their narrative. Because this was the FBI that spied on the presidential campaign. This was the FBI that said if you're a parent going to a school board meeting, you need to be investigated. This was the FBI that said if you're a pro-life Catholic, you're an extremist. This is the FBI who raided President Trump's home. And this is the FBI who had 26 confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6th. And it's the same FBI who can't tell us who planted the pipe bombs, who can't tell us who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and who can't tell us who put cocaine at the White House.
Those are some boring talking points that we've been hearing for a couple of years now. How interesting is it, though, that they're talking about parents at school boards, Catholics being surveilled, an FBI that did a bunch of things. A lot of them I brought personally, myself, to his committee. I've never once talked to Jim Jordan. You guys know that? Never once. He's never once reached out. His people once told me that I was too politically hot because of the way that I do it. You know why? Because I don't have a team. And I don't go, oh, well, we got the new management, so it's all fixed. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and anybody else that's involved in this, they're all good. We got it. It's the same FBI that did that. That's the same people that are working there. It's the same organization that looks for a persistent and evolving threat. Where does my paycheck come from? How do I get paid? Because the IPM, the Integrated Program Management, the FBI's quota system, it still exists. These people are still incentivized. They just changed what the incentives are. Do you realize that? So now instead of white supremacy, we're going to talk about things that are more interesting. How about the really, really scary thing that the same threat that always existed has always existed for a very long time? Like jihadi-based foreign terrorists are the single biggest threat that will always be out here because they look at America and they say, that is my enemy. They have it well. We have it bad. We're going to go out there and do dangerous things to try to make their life closer to what we want. There's not even like a good end goal because what is it going to do? Stop the American involvement? It's just going to involve more and more of a circle while the guys in Qatar collect a ton of money. Like the guys in Hamas were billionaires, right? We've played their joke clips here before. Before I get too deep into the weeds on that, let me just talk about, we're going back in time. We're talking about things from 2019, 2020, 2021. We can all the way go back to 2017, and I was using Patriot coolers back then when I was working for the FBI. When I went on that trip that I showed you on the screen, Patriot cooler came with me. That's just the way it worked. This is not the one that came with me. This is a newer one. This is the one of the 20 ounces. These are great little cups. They keep your beverages from spilling. This one's got coffee in it right now. You can see the coffee. There it is. See? They do a fantastic job. If you guys want to check out a Patriot cooler, do patriotcoolers.com, promo code KYLE, save yourself 10%. You don't have to put in your name or email address like you would if you wanted to get the military discount. It's the same discount the military guys get, though. And every single day I use one of their products. In the mornings, I use their coolers. When we go to the grocery store, we're always using their actual cooler, the big one, not the tumblers, but we have like a 50 quart. One of my buddies just reached out. He's got to go do some hunting season. He's like, hey, we got river raft trips coming up. We got RV stuff coming up. We've got hunting and so on coming up in the fall. I want to get set up. What do I want? I said, here's the cooler. Here's the link. Here's the promo. He's like, done. I don't back products that I don't actually use myself, and I actually don't back products that I don't think are worth the money. This is one that I've spent my money on quite a bit. Again, patriotcoolers.com. Check out the link if you want the Kyle Seraphin Show collection. Actually, once you have an engraved mug that looks just like yours and nobody else can take it, it is pretty cool, and people will know that it's yours. It won't get taken at the at the coffee bar at work if you're standing there and you're waiting in the kitchen in the break room. Nobody's going to be able to walk off with your cup if it has the American flag upside down with the Suspendables badge on it. So just saying. Check them out. They're already pre-done out there. Okay, we're going to get deeper into the domestic terrorism game, only because this story did not go very wide. It didn't go wide, and I don't know why. This seems crazy to me. This is a truly salacious, truly threatening problem, and my only answer to it is because this issue of 1,200 foreign terrorist suspects inside the United States is beyond the capabilities of our federal law enforcement to handle it. I'll say it again one more time. If there are actually 1,200 foreign terrorist subjects that are operationally doing terrorism in the United States or plan to do so, that is more than our federal government can watch. Definitively. That means that the threat of foreign terrorism actually outstrips our ability to respond to it. When I used to work for the Bureau, one of the things I did was on the regular, we'd have a caseload set up. We were going to go do a white collar case. We're going to go watch a gang case. We're going to go do a child sex trafficking case, whatever it was. We're going to go watch a bad guy, find out where they go. And then suddenly out of nowhere, we'd catch a freaking phone call at 10 o'clock at night when it was snowing out. We have a priority 415 case. 415s are foreign-based international terrorism, the real threat, not white supremacy, not made-up Catholic problems, not parents who have an issue at school boards. I'm talking about actual threats. The real threats are dudes who trained in camps, like guys you see on the screen, with the balaclavas on and the AKs and wearing all black man jammies. They got the head wraps. They look a lot like these people, honestly, though. I mean, you know where these guys get their marching, their uniform tactics. They look like that. Yeah, I'll keep playing it because these people, domestic terrorism is a real thing in so much as we actually will acknowledge it. But 1,200 foreign-born legit terrorists, that's a 24/7, 415 surveillance requirement. 415, again, is the FBI's code for internal terrorism. For all of you that were J6ers or that thought you might be at a school board meeting and you might be watched because of it, for all of you that were considered, quote unquote, militia violent extremists because you own a gun and you think the Second Amendment is like absolute because you have a Betsy Ross flag on your wall like I do in most of my rooms, those are 266s. That's what the FBI calls them. But the 415 cases, they would spin up everything. We would get called out in the middle of the night to go babysit. That's all we did. We would just watch them and contain them. There was no plan. You just had 6 armed agents so that if this person decided to enact an act of terrorism, we could squash it as quick as possible. In reality, what it was is it was the cover your ass version, so the boss could say, we had surveillance on them, we were responding, but they got away from our net. At least they could say they had done something, so they didn't have another 9/11 on their hands where everybody dies and nobody knew what was going on and it was an intel failure. It was like, no. We did something, it just wasn't enough. How could we know? We need more funding. 24/7 surveillance looks like 6 armed agents for 8 hours apiece on shifts in perpetuity. I've done this for weeks at a time. I've done it intermittently for weeks at a time, where they would bring us on and bring us off, depending on what they thought the threat level was. If there are 1,200 foreign terrorists, and we're talking about having 28 or 21 FBI agents watching them at any given time, because you're going to have a supervisor that's also part of that. So you got a supervisor, plus you got shifts of 6. Maybe there's a command post. We're not even going to factor that in. 6 times 3, that's 18. Plus 2 for the supervisors, times 1,200. That's 24,000. That's 24,000. There's only 14,000 FBI agents, and at least 3,000 or 4,000 of them are doing nothing but management and briefings and coordinations. There's twice as many required surveillances if this is legit. And I have no reason to believe otherwise. In fact, I think 1,200 is a very low number. And by the way, so did the media on the right when we weren't the ones who were in charge and it wasn't our thing here. Here you go. Here's some headlines from the past. Let's cover them down. Man, it's so gross. Okay, so headlines from the past. Going to the center square, which is one of the few people that I see covering the 1,200 foreign terror suspects. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the greatest number of suspected terrorists were apprehended at the northern border. Congressman said, we're outnumbered at the northern border. This was in August of 2024, just before the election. Under the Harris administration, the Biden-Harris administration, these individuals, people who were identified on the U.S. terrorist watch list, we call them KSTs, known/suspected terrorists. The same people that Aaron Stevenson called out as being popped up and receiving children, KSTs. The thing that we talked about coming in after Biden failed in 21 and did the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And by the way, I've got another story that we're going to end with here because I think it's also relevant, talking about the poor me story of the security forces folks from Afghanistan. If you listen to what we said, and we did an interview a long time back, we'll have him back again soon. The audience has changed. We got more people. Aaron Stevenson told me that we know for a fact that the first people who came into the United States through the Afghan resettlement and the parole, it 100% was people that abandoned their security posts in Afghanistan. So the security forces groups out of Afghanistan that gave up to the Taliban were the first ones that got resettled here, who are the ones that are responsible for what happened at Abbey Gate. Just saying. Since fiscal year 2021, U.S. Border Patrol and U.S. Customs and Border Protection have apprehended 1,746. This is, again, in 2021. 1,746 known or suspected terrorists nationwide, the greatest number in U.S. history. That was the first year under Biden. They apprehended 1,750 people. We always estimate that they catch about a third of who comes in. Now that means that you are looking at, 3,500 that made it through in that year alone? 1,200 is a pittance. There are probably tens of thousands over the last decade of people that have been able to sneak into this country. The majority, 1,100 of them, were at the northern border coming in to the United States from Canada. That's the thing that's most crazy. We've been so focused on the southern border. If they caught 1,000, that means they got 2,000 that probably made it through from the northern border walking across. And how many of you that live in Minnesota or Michigan or upstate New York who live in, Montana, have been out there watching the borderline and trying to see if there's known or suspected terrorists, a bunch of Afghan looking guys cruising in, Syrians, Jordanians, whatever, Saudis popping in over that thing. There's so much unguarded, just property. You could drive across, you could walk into Canada all over the place, whether it be in the woods or the plains. There's tons of it. In 2023, 736 KSTs were caught trying to come in, which was the highest record for a single year at that time. The majority, almost 500 of them, were apprehended, again, at the northern border. 736, let's call it 700. That means 1,400 made it in that year? In 2023, we're already at like over 5,000 just in the last 4 years with those numbers. So 1,200 suspected foreign terrorists in the United States is a pittance compared to what's really out there, and it outstrips the ability to actually respond to it. These people are identified at the terrorist screening data set. They're KSTs again. It's a potential threat to the United States. Does that mean every single one of them does terrorist activity? They might actually just be associated with. They might have crossed paths with a bomb maker at some point. So you can even like pare that down a bit. But when you do, you're still going to end up with thousands of these people, more than we have the ability to respond to if they did it every day, nonstop, full time, kind of like what I used to do right here. This was a 24/7 surveillance. This was 3 shifts of people shipped in from across the country to watch one individual involved in terroristic activity that swore allegiance to a foreign terrorist organization. You guys get it? It's not good. And then in the meantime, what do we got? Do we got people that are willing to go out there and prosecute it? Do we have Republicans that are like, okay, we're serious. We understand there was a big problem. We were calling white supremacists the issue again, right? What's it look like? That's not it. White supremacists, the biggest threat to the homeland, all that nonsense, the FBI briefing on it. Do we have those people tuned in and saying, look, we've redirected our domestic terrorism operations to go after the really bad guys? No. Here's the leader for the Senate, a Republican, apparently, who says, I'd love to get you guys a real attorney in D.C. We'd like to have Ed Martin there, and he seems like a nice guy, but he's too sympathetic to January 6th, which we all know was so problematic, so I can't confirm him. We're not going to get Ed Martin confirmed in D.C. That's President Trump's pick to be the United States attorney in Washington, D.C. Not going to happen. Here he is saying it, and it's about January 6th. We don't have any alignment on our side.
He is, I don't believe he's being advanced to the markup. And I met with Mr. Martin. He seems like a good man. Most of my concerns related to January 6th. And he built a compelling case on some of the 15, 12 prosecutions that were probably heat of the moment bad decisions. But where we probably have a difference is I think anybody that breached the perimeter should have been in prison for some period of time. Whether it's 30 days or 3 years is debatable, but I have no tolerance for anybody who entered the building on January the 6th, and that's probably where most of the friction was.
I see. So he disagreed with you on that?
Well, no, I have to say that Mr. Martin did a good job of explaining how there were people that probably got caught up in it, but they made the stupid decision to come through a building that had been breached and that the police officers and others were saying stay away. So the difference wasn't that they should be charged, in my estimation, it's by how much. That's an argument I'm willing to have, but we have to be very, very clear that what happened on January the 6th was wrong. It wasn't, it was not prompted or created by other people to put those people in trouble. They made a stupid decision and they disgraced the United States by absolutely destroying the Capitol, and I can't have any patience for it.
Yeah, it's absolutely destroyed. They're not standing right there in the Capitol, right? Because they absolutely destroyed the Capitol by doing some damage. Same as we've seen on every single college campus where you had these idiots go and burn things. We showed it to you yesterday. Rolling footage. The FBI does not get involved in those sort of things. There's nobody that would care about trespassing. Do you know how I know? Because I was there in 2020. I watched them do the same thing. I watched people on the political left have the National Guard shipped in and set up defensive fighting posts all around Washington, D.C. in a green zone. None of those people got prosecuted. We had BLM kneelers. Let's assume that the FBI agents who took a knee for BLM did so because they were actually being threatened. How many of the people that were threatening them were charged and arrested? How many people came running out to surround those people and charge them with obstruction of a federal officer? None? None of them. Nobody was arrested on that day in June of 2020. Not a single person. This is such nonsense. He's safe, though. He's going to continue on. So again, don't tell me that we won. We should be asking more questions. And then you have the messaging that it's all about what? It's all about whether or not we're wrapping people up, whether or not we're going after American kids. They are distracting you with the lowest hanging stupid fruit. And the same people that arrested J6ers are going to be the same people that are doing whatever else the domestic terrorism priority is, because they are the foot soldiers of the regime. They are the people that go after the current thing. It looks like this. FBI agents asked the court to bar their team from disclosing their names. We covered this yesterday. That's Mark Zaid. Mark Zaid, who has openly threatened people on social media and said, I'd love to have some of my intelligence community contacts look into you, find out what they can dig on you. That is not what our intelligence agencies are set up to do, because they have no constitutional limits the way a law enforcement agency is supposed to. And that is the biggest problem with having the counterintelligence mission sit at the FBI when they don't have to only tie it to criminality. It is going to bring you to something that I find to be truly troubling. This is the director of the FBI. Dan Bongino has been doing the same thing. There's all this crap on social media about this group, a violent network, 764. They're going out there and running after the low-hanging fruit because suddenly they care about kids. We talk about this, me and the Suspendables, all the time. The FBI opened up 250 investigations in what? They call it a terrorist network. They said, I've talked to people in the Bureau. They said all of these things are coming in through the JTTF. The same people who went after January 6ers. The same morally flexible people who have a morally flexible mission that sends them towards the current thing. And that's the current thing today. Why are we so interested in this? Why are people acting like the FBI suddenly cares about pedophiles when they haven't? Because nobody has gone after anybody on the Epstein list. Do I care about a bunch of teenagers being shitty teenagers online, doing awful things to each other? I guess. Do you know how many AUSAs are going to prosecute out of those 250 cases? Almost none of them. Because for all of the talk about it that has been out there, and it's all social media buzz. I've had people inside the Bureau tell me the FBI is basically running on social media buzz, wherever the excitement is. I saw that this gal was talking about it on Alex Jones the other day. So now it's exciting. It's something people want to get involved in. Real clearly, the quote-unquote 764 threat are mostly teenagers, as discovered by looking it up. Go type it into your search engine and find out. It starts in like 2019, so it's a 5-year-old threat, persistent and evolving. It's 5 years old, and it's a 15-year-old who launched it. He was basically doing sexploitations. They've been doing this thing for 20 plus years, people. There's just been a different goal. People have gone out online, found people, they've catfished them, or they've seduced them, or they've used romantic fraud. Some people take money. Some people they blackmail and they extort. That's a big deal. The FBI didn't care about it until some kid killed himself. These are teenagers going after other teenagers in a pedophilic way, I guess. Maybe it's like a 15-year-old going after a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. It's disgusting. Do you want to keep it safe? It's super easy. Don't let your kids get online. The end. Don't let them have unsupervised access to the internet. Don't let them on Discord. Don't let them on chat servers. Don't let them on Reddit. Don't let them on 4chan or 8chun or whatever these things are. Don't let them do it. The end. Either you control your kids or somebody else will have to go and have a federal government response to it. We're talking about teenagers going after teenagers. If you look at the big arrest that they announced, like it was some sort of triumphant thing, don't look at the Epstein failure over here. Pay attention to what we just did. We arrested a 21-year-old and a 20-year-old who've been doing this for 5 years when they were flipping teenagers, which is why they had to wait so long to go after anybody. And that you add a little bit of satanic stuff and call it terrorism, domestic terrorism, and it's a loose network because they use the same number. That number relates back to the area code in Stevensville, Texas, with a 15-year-old idiot who's now in jail for like 80 years for being a creep. Don't get me wrong, there's tons of creeps out there. But 250 cases in the FBI, we had thousands of cases on J6ers. This is not what the FBI mobilizes for a big threat. It sounds like a lot. There's 55 field offices. Do the case, like on average, there's like 5 cases per field office. Does it mean that these people are not evil? Yeah, of course they're evil. There's lots of evil in the world. But is it a federal matter to have teenagers who are trying to exploit teenagers to send them sexually explicit pictures and then talk them into like doing harm to themselves? Do you know how your kids don't do that stuff? Love them, talk to them, know what they're doing online, and don't give them unfettered access to a bunch of evil that's out there. We actually all used to know this stuff. They used to cry about whether or not you let your kids watch, television programs that were violent, or whether or not you were, letting them play video games that you didn't know what it is. This is just as this is the same sort of like hands-off parroting as letting them watch Netflix and finding out that they're pushing gender ideology on like kids shows. It's the same problem. It's unsupervised kids, and it can be fixed. How about the kids that went missing for child sex trafficking? Are we talking about that? Nope. How about the elite pedophiles, the people that are associated with the guy who was a billionaire that we were going to hear about on day one, and the files are on my desk? I'm telling you, my friends told me they were doing redactions. That's real. They were actually doing redactions on the names of victims so they could release those files. But their hope is that you won't pay attention because you're a fickle American public and you're going to have your attention span easily distracted because Jim Jordan's going to tell you that we won.
We've got Congressman Jim Jordan, who's the head of the Judiciary Committee. And I know you guys have been looking, a lot at these activist judges. Talk about the problem that it is and what we're doing about it.
Well, the fundamental problem is exactly what the president said. He put his name on the ballot. He got elected by we the people. He gets to make the calls as the guy who runs the executive branch, not some unelected federal district judge who somehow thinks they're equivalent to the president of the United States. So that's, the left always wants the unelected to make the calls, the Faucis and the Boasbergs. They want them making the judgments and the decisions, not the people who put their name on the ballot, but that's not how our system works. So we've actually sent a letter to the court. We're kind of curious about how Judge Boasberg gets all these cases. You know, he was the guy who was on the FISA court when they spied on President Trump's campaign. He was the judge that oversaw Kevin Kleinsmith's case, the guy who altered a document, lied to the court, the FISA court. He oversaw that case. He was the judge who said, turn the plane around, bring the bad guy back who's a member of a gang, who did terrible things, who's here illegally. And he's also now the judge who gets randomly assigned the Signalgate case against Secretary Hegseth. So we wrote the court and said, you know, how does it all work out? How does this random assignment process work? Because we're concerned about the same thing President Trump was talking about.
He did the meme, people. We sent a sternly worded letter and we're going to have a hearing. That's the end for Jim Jordan, who ought to have a podcast because all he wants to do is just list things that went wrong with no solution in mind. The reason I say this is because all this stuff is distraction. It continues to be distraction. You're going to cry about the judge. What are you going to do? Are you going to defund it? Are you going to take away the task number that the Treasury Secretary brought up and say that this particular court is no longer funded? We are not appropriating money that way. You're on the Judiciary Committee. Can you do that? Go to your friends on the appropriations and say this court needs no task number, no money. They're not going to do it. It's made up. They're going to tell you that it's child sexual exploitation because that's really salacious. That gets people going. They're going to tell you that businesses are being reported and targeted. They're going after, you know, kids and U.S. citizens are getting wrapped up in this because they're children. By the way, do we really want to like separate parents? I got a little clip from that too. We'll do it again tomorrow because there's no reason not to. What about Epstein though? That's my question. How are they trying to distract you? What is that distractionary method that you are not paying attention to? Where is your attention span and what is the opportunity cost? Because it's not working if you watch social media buzz. They're doing everything they can to focus in on something that is a tiny issue compared to the larger issue, which is inaction by our government and an acting like we've rebranded and therefore all problems are fixed. It's theatrical. This is a Benny Johnson clip. It's actually kind of hard to watch, but Comer basically gives speculation with no information, saying that we're never going to get the Epstein files. Why is this not? This needs to stay front and center. Only because they made it an issue. They said we were going to have it. If you don't talk about things, then we don't hold you accountable for your own words. If you do, then you better live up to it.
What's next? I mean, we did a little bit of a preview on the Epstein files. Obviously, that's like finding a unicorn in Washington, D.C. You have come on and talked about that on this program, just for the sake of transparency, which is very big for you. And so, in closing, any motion on that, any movement on that? We hear that there's a timeline now.
I hope James has the Epstein files, because I don't think the Department of Justice has them, or at least the Attorney General does not have them, or she would have turned them over. The President ordered them released. The Attorney General ordered them released. We all know they have not been released. And one of my biggest fears that I had, and I expressed this with Kash Patel and a lot of people, Stephen Miller, and a lot of people going into the new administration, I'm like, I hope they're not shredding documents right now. This was a few weeks.
I'm going to cut away from it because it's just long-winded and all he's saying is shredding documents. There's no documents that need to be shredded. That's not how the FBI file system works. It's like everybody else in the world right now. It's on a computer. And these are on computers that are in the secret compartmented area, what you would call the Simpernet if you were working in the military, for those of you that are familiar. It's on the Simpernet. And it is a file server system that is designed to not be tampered with and does not allow deletion so that you can maintain consistency when you do prosecutions. All your unclassified cases are there. All your classified cases are there. And if the FBI is the group that actually did something to make it go away, the way that they hid the Hunter Biden laptop and we don't know where it is and all this other kind of crap, that means that we have an FBI that lost evidence, that is deliberately working against a prosecution, that is not following congressional mandates, that is not following the mandates of the president, who is their boss. We're talking about a group that is flexible and serves its own needs. Again, it's the same reason I told you that when you see them go to a Norm Eisen and a Mark Zaid to defend them against the administration, they are hostile and adversarial, regardless of who's in charge. Tulsi Gabbard is in an uphill fight, and she's still exposing some information. She seems to be doing a pretty decent job because she's pretty quiet. I hear nobody on the left crying about the FBI today. I'm going to hammer it home again. Find me someone that is upset about the job that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are doing over on the political left. If you are not taking flack, you are not over the target. I promised you I would show you what terrorism looks like. Let me show you what it doesn't look like. Here's the clip from yesterday. This is two people who have some real sympathetic ties to terrorism based on their language, their religion, and their upbringing, and the way that they present information, saying white supremacy is the problem. Here it is, and I'm going to show you what the real problem looks like.
A lot of conservatives in particular would say that the rise in Islamophobia is a result not of hate, but of fear, a legitimate fear, they say, of quote-unquote jihadist terrorism, whether it's Fort Hood or San Bernardino or the recent truck attack in New York. What do you say to them?
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country.
That's factually inaccurate. Here are the most wanted terrorists, according to that FBI that Jim Jordan told us is good to go. Here's what they look like. I'm going to scroll through it. This is FBI.gov/wanted/terrorists. These are the most wanted terrorists. There's 23 items. There's one lady from the Weather Underground from back in the day. Mohammed Abdullah Khalif Hassan Ariana Rahaja, Wahuda Muhammad Jahama, Haifi al-Turki, Radulan Sharinani, Hassan Iz al-Din, Mohammed Ahmed al-Munawar. Like, none of these names are even pronounceable to me. These are just, I just hear Muhammad. This is the Durka thing. Hassan Muhammad al-Amuri, al-Nasir, Aziz Awalda. Look at them. They're all Islamic terrorists, minus maybe one or two. Almost every damn one of the 23 here. This is the face of what the FBI considers to be the most wanted terrorists. I went looking for domestic. There are 0 in the last 5 years that I could find listed that way. So what do you see the left actually crying about? They don't want you to pay attention. They want you to be sympathetic. There's 1,200 alleged terrorists minimum. A lot of those, probably 600 plus, are supposed to be gang members, so fine. There's probably thousands and thousands. But remember, NPR is going to run cover for them. Many Afghans living in the United States fear being tortured or killed if they get deported. The guy showing up on the screen, who was a one-off story, was part of the security forces that was supposed to be keeping the Herat province. He was in the Afghan Interior Ministry as a security commander. And he fled here. And his story, and what's going on, and why he doesn't go back. You don't want to go back there. So look at him. Look how American he looks. He's got a bull on his shirt, and he's got a Texas flag, and he's around a wooden door. How American is that? What's more American than being American in Texas, America? Meanwhile, they've missed out on the point that we took 100,000 people from a country that had no physical records, where they just made up who they were, how old they were, where they came from, when they were born, what their name was. And we had no idea. And some of them have significant biometric indicators that they should be KSTs, should be listed as them, but they were able to avoid it because we weren't allowed to query that. And that's one of the things that Aaron Stevenson brought forward as well. And he lost his job for that. He has not been reinstated at DHS, by the way. So for all the good work being done by Kristi Noem and the folks over there, despite the cosplay, they haven't brought back people who are analysts that lost their job for calling out real threats and real problems. And luckily, our media is going to run cover for them. It's on both sides, folks. It just keeps happening. It's nauseating when you think about it long enough. So that's what I got for today on that one. I don't know how to fix it other than looking at the people that are not interested in fixing it. And it's very apparent to me that they are all over the place in our federal government. All right. Thank all of you. Here's the live chat on the screen right now. Thank all of you for joining us. We do appreciate you guys coming in here. I think it's fun. We're seeing more and more action over on the folks on YouTube. We're seeing plenty of you that are interacting with us over on Rumble. So it's both ways. Again, this is a one-man show. So if you're watching on any of those programs, if you're watching over at rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin, please make sure you give us a like. Make sure you have subscribed to the channel. You can bump those numbers up. You can leave a comment. I read almost all of them. Some of them I interact with as well because you guys make really good points. Same thing over on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. You guys can follow us there. Like the show, get notified when we go live. And if you want to support the program financially, or if you just want to interact with the community, go to KyleSeraphin.com. It'll take you to our homepage for locals. It's not a sign-up sheet, and that will just take you into the main page. You can watch the show there. You can interact with people, leave comments, and so on. You just can be a free member. And then lastly, if you want to share the show with somebody else, KyleSeraphinShow.com is an easy link you can send off to anyone. We appreciate if you guys do, and it's an easy thing to do. I do have a palate cleanser because there is an answer to all of this, by the way. The answer is self-reliance. It's always been. I'm going to give you a guy that I have personally spent time with. I have trained with this man, and I used to pick up guns from this man. His name is Michael Cargill. He lives the talk that he makes. He walks the walk. And here's a story that I'd never heard about him. I've probably picked up 20 or 30 guns from his store. Central Texas Gunwork. They get a free plug if you're in Austin on the south side. Check out Central Texas Gunwork and Mike Cargill. He brought the lawsuit that made bump stocks back in fad. The Supreme Court ruled on that, Cargill versus Garland. That's a big deal because what it said is that the law actually matters when we start talking about firearms, and that rate of fire is not relevant. It's the mechanical action of one bullet, one trigger pull. That's what they established. That also makes FRTs legal as far as I can tell. Mike Cargill tells the story about why he became a gun person, and it is the answer to all of this terrorism stuff. Self-reliance, take care of yourself. The thing that the FBI called militia, violent extremists, like Mike Glover, is the same thing that Mike Cargill's talking about. So this is your palate cleanse. Be a good neighbor, be armed, be prepared to take care of yourself.
What was the turning point for you from somebody who grew up not seeing guns to such a strong advocate now?
My grandmother, when she was 70, she felt that she wanted to become a nurse.
At 70?
At 70 years old. I'm going to go to college and become a nurse. It so happened that one day when she was leaving a library, the guy came along while she was sitting at that bus stop, grabbed her, pulled her into bushes, and mugged her and raped her.
Did you feel guilty that you weren't there to support your grandma when that happened?
Yes, and that's the thing.
And you're trying to make it right?
Yes, because I felt that I was not there for her when she needed me.
And until then, you'd never really been a gun advocate?
No, never had a gun. After that happened, I went and got my handgun license, became a Texas handgun license instructor, and started teaching just my family and neighbors. And I feel that by doing this, I can make sure that that does not happen to some other lady.
What was the turning point for you from somebody who grew up not seeing guns to?
Yeah, sorry, that's a repeat there. That's the turning point. Somebody experiences an act of violence and you don't have something to do about it. Give yourself an option to go do it. He always says, more guns equals less crime. Go buy a gun. I agree with that 100%. That's why we got him on the desk here. That's why we got him in the back of the show set. We have them all over the house. Everybody in this house that's old enough, all my children have shotguns all the way down except my toddler. They've at least pulled the trigger and seen what it is and understand about safe action. We are a gun-safe family. So go out there and be responsible for your own safety. The FBI is not going to do it for you. They're going to turn on you the minute they get an opportunity. And you will be part of that persistent and evolving threat. All right, my friends, God bless you. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it. I'll see you again tomorrow at 0930 Eastern time or whenever you listen. Again, like the show, share it out there to somebody, leave us a comment. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.